Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We learn Mishna Yevamos, Parak Zion, chapter 16, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah 5. Afilu shama min anoshim oimros. Even if someone heard, or overheard, rather, women saying, Meis ish pleni, so-and-so died. Meaning, this we're talking about here, that, he's walking by a group of women, and they're schmoozing. And what are they saying? So-and-so died. They did not come to testify about that person. They're not coming before a basin to testify. They're just, sharing current events. So if a person hears the women saying that, dayai, that's enough for you to go to basin and say that this woman's husband died. You want to go ahead, even though it's, as we say, this is hearsay. You didn't see the guy die, but you overheard that he died. That is enough for you to come to basin and to say that this woman's husband is dead and she may remarry. This is all part of how the Chachamim accepted certain type of evidence that would never be accepted anywhere else. They accepted it here, and as is brought down here, the sages allowed this and other lenient forms of testimony with regard to a man's death, based on the fact that the wife will surely verify that her husband is dead before remarrying, as we have learned. All of these ideas, all of these leniencies, all of these kinds of evidence that the Chachamim are allowing are all premised on the fact that this woman is not just going to go ahead and rely on that, she's going to check into it herself before she remarries. But there has to be a basis to be able to start doing it. And that basis can even be where you overheard, women that were just, talking amongst each other and mentioning that. That is enough for you now to come to the Beis Din and to say her husband is dead and she can remarry. Rabbi Yehuda says, he says another case. Afilu shama min atinoikos. Even if he heard children, oimrim saying, "Hare anu holchen lispoid v'likvar es ish ploni." We are going to eulogize and bury so and so. That he overheard children talking. You ever heard children talking and saying, we're going to a funeral. We're going to eulogize and bury so-and-so. The Rabbi Yehuda says that's enough. Now, really, the Bartanura points out that it's not enough. Even though the wording of the Mishnah sounds like, even if you just heard the children saying, we're going to the funeral, that's not enough. You actually have to hear them saying, we are coming back from the funeral. Anu halcha means we are going to return from eulogizing and burying so-and-so. So number one, it's not that they're on their way to the funeral, but rather they're on their way back from the funeral. Not only on their way back from the funeral, they've got to be discussing details of the funeral, meaning they have to discuss which rabbis were there, how many eulogizers there were. They have to talk about what happened there. Because if we don't have these two things, then number one, they are coming back from the funeral, and number two, talking about the details of the funeral, like which rabbis were there at the funeral, then we cannot rely on that. Because, interestingly, the Bartanura points this out, is that little children would sometimes play funeral, and they would take an insect that died and make a funeral for it and give it a name. So if they're saying, number one, they're saying we're going to a funeral, right? So number one, it could be going to the funeral means going to the funeral that they're, making up, so to speak. Or in the bottom here, they bring down another way of seeing it is that if they're saying we're going to your funeral, they may be jumping the gun. They may know that somebody's very ill and dying, and they're talking about going to the funeral before the guy dies. That's another way of looking at it, at least that part. But regarding the details of the funeral, again, you need to know, you need to hear from them more than just the fact that there was a funeral, because it could very well be that they're talking about the funeral that they made up, in the sense of, they played funeral. They had this insect, they buried, that's what it brings down. There was a game that they would play, they had this insect, and they would, and it would die, and they would bury it, and give it a whole name. I just have to mention this story. I don't know if it's true or not, but I remember hearing this story years ago in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, when somebody passed away in Yerushalayim, they have a car going around and announcing it, right? It could be in Yiddish, it could be in Ivrit. When it goes out, it goes the levaya for the funeral for so and so will go out from this and this place, and they say a name. They announce the name. So one time heard that these children found a dead cat, and they started going around saying the levaya from Rav Katz, the funeral from Rav Katz will proceed. It was a game. In some, it's by some children. It could be a game, and therefore you got to hear more. It can't just be there's a funeral. You got to talk about how many rabbis and how many this. If they start talking about those kind of details, that that's real. It's not something they're just making up as part of their game. Okay, so you have another example of where basically what we have now here is two examples of where the people who are where the information is not coming from people who actually are coming to testify in the Beis Din about something that they know of, that they witnessed. It's basically hearsay, but these are circumstances that it's enough based on the hearsay to come to Beis Din and say that the woman's husband died. And as the Mishnah says, "Bein shu miskaven, bein she'einu miskaven," we will accept the testimony of someone whether they intend to testify that the person is dead or they're not intending to testify. They're just talking about it. Okay, now, the last part of the Mishnah is a qualification. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer, Yehuda the son of Bava said, "B'Yisrael af al pi shu miskaven," by a Jew, you can accept his testimony even if he doesn't intend to testify. Ubegoy, but when it comes to a non-Jew, imhoya miskaven and edusay edus. If his intention is to testify, his testimony is not accepted. So although we have been saying that even people that are typically not accepted for testimony can be accepted for testimony for the woman regarding her husband's death, when it comes to a non-Jew who comes to testify that the man is dead, you cannot rely on his testimony. And when he's actually coming to testify, we have to suspect that he's not telling the truth. But if let's say he's not testifying, you overheard him talking. You heard the guy talking, the non-Jew talking about how so and so died. So in that case, he's not coming to testify. He's just talking. It's we call Mesiach Lefi Tumai. He's just talking. He's not coming to accomplish anything. He's not trying to testify. Not trying to change anything. He's just stating a fact. He overheard him talking. Then you can accept what he's saying, because if he's just talking, there's no reason to say that he's lying. But where he's coming to actually do something, we have to suspect that maybe he's coming to make problems. So when it comes to a Jew, we've said before that even if the person who we're basing the testimony on is not coming to testify, they're just talking, and you may have thought, well, they're just talking, maybe they're not so serious, maybe they're not so careful. So the Mishnah says no. Even if they're not intending to testify, you can accept what they're saying, and based on that, testify that you can base on what they're saying. You can go and testify that the man died. So when it comes to a Jew, even if he doesn't intend to testify, you can believe him. When it comes to a non-Jew, the only time you can believe him, the only time you can say something based on him is if he's not intending to testify. But once he's intending to testify, you cannot accept what he's saying. Okay. Next. Now, and now you say regarding your friend, Devarim hanikarim, you see some kind of evidence that he wants to hurt you, wants to damage you physically, monetarily. Even if you did not hear anything from anybody else, no one said anything to you, you though have basis to say that somebody is coming to hurt you. You are now able to go over and investigate, and you could ask people. You're going to ask people if they know if his intention is to hurt you. Now, if those people respond to you and say that, yes, he does want to hurt you, theoretically, or one could say, well, that's rechilas, because they're telling you what somebody wants to do to you. But in this case, you're allowed to do it. You're only doing it because you're trying to protect yourself. You don't have to worry that now you're going to be causing people to speak badly about someone, which would, which you could say is rechilas, but in this case, it's not. In this case, you don't have to worry about that because the reason you're investigating is in order to protect yourself. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. The case